Good morning, everybody. Today we'll have some fun reading from my novel Bug Guy. It's about a guy who turns into a giant bug, like in that Kafka novel, but in this one he becomes an influencer. Joining me are my friends who have come along to read with me. Dave, Edie, please introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Dave M. Strum, and yes, I will be reading the audio voice of Greg and a few of his male co-workers.
Hi, and I'm Edie Matthews, and I will be reading the female voices, including his mother.
So let's begin. Chapter 1, Bugman Begins. One morning I woke up and felt something was amiss. My skin was much harder than usual. My legs were super skinny and had grown tiny spines, and I had antennae waving around like a pair of whips attached to my head. Holy crap, I thought to myself. I have antennae now? I turned to look at myself in the mirror and instantly jumped out of bed. Where my usual pasty face should be, there now lay two huge eyes, black as the darkness of the eternal void, and a pair of sharp mandibles that open and close sideways. I tried to scream, but all that came out were a bunch of buzzing and hissing noises. In a panic, I ran in circles on the ceiling for the next 3 minutes, but then thought, no, you have to defeat this type of negative thinking with positive thinking, the way those hundreds of self-help books always said you should. This isn't the worst thing to happen to you. You aren't dying or paralyzed. All your 6 legs still work, and you can still get around. You can do this. You can get up and go to work. Slowly, I calmed down and crawled in front of the mirror. But looking at my own reflection still sent chills down my ventral nerve cord. Confidence. Confidence is the key. If you can show you are self-confident, others will follow you to the ends of the earth. I stood up straight on my 2 longest legs and tried to strike a confident pose, but I was still too weirded out seeing my 6 legs. Harness the power of imagination, I thought. Imagine you are your hero at the top of his power. I tried to feel like my hero, but as a rock star. I summoned the sounds of thousands of fans packing an arena, and as I took the stage, there was pandemonium. Attractive women up front were squealing, while t-shirted men chanted, "Gregory Samsa! Gregory Samsa!" After a few minutes, the crowd calmed down, and I burst open with a few rapid-fire notes on my guitar. With my extra legs, I could really shred. Even the infirm were on their feet. As I was imagining all of this, I was playing air guitar in front of the mirror. Seeing myself as a rock star felt empowering to myself and all the other bugs. My antennae waved back and forth in sleek motion instead of frantically. But duty called, so I stopped strumming on my imaginary guitar and slicked back my antennae with hair gel, then looked in my wardrobe for something to wear to work. Unfortunately, none of my suits fit anymore, and even if they did, I didn't have the hands to put them on. It didn't matter since my exoskeleton already covered my nakedness. In fact, I found it looked quite handsome because it was incredibly shiny and smooth. But I still grabbed a tie and threw it on, managing a Windsor knot, if barely. Next, I needed to deal with the fact I couldn't speak normally. All that came out of my mouth was insect noise, but I found that by concentrating I could approximate basic English. And with repetition I enunciate A-E-I-O-U, she sells seashells by the seashore, and how now, brown cow, intelligibly. Not that I would have much use for those phrases, but this took time, and before I could finish, Mom knocked and said,
Greg, are you up yet? You're going to be late for work.
She impatiently opened the door, saw me sitting on the bed, and screamed and ran away. She forced herself up against a corner of the living room, her chest heaving and eyes bulging. I crawled up to her, lifted my front right leg, and waved, and more hissed than said,
"Hi, Mom."
She loosened her grip on the walls, inched toward me, and asked,
Greg, is that you?
"Yes?"
Her jaw hung open for a long time. She stared, speechless. When she finally regained the ability to speak, trying to sound matter-of-fact, she asked,
What happened to you?
I don't know. I'm not a doctor or an entomologist.
I went to the kitchen and she followed me. Bewildered, she asked,
What do you think you're doing?
Getting breakfast.
That's the least of your problems right now. You should go to a doctor.
I sat at the kitchen table on my usual seat, filled a plate with pancakes from the stove, and said,
Why? What is the doctor gonna do? Does he have a serum that turns insects into humans?
No, but he might be able to. My point is, you can't go to work like this.
Why not?
Your boss is going to freak out when she sees you're a giant bug.
My boss is going to freak out more if I don't show up to work today.
Her eyes widened in disbelief.
Fine. If that's the way you want to be, I'm not going to stop you. Can't help you if you're stupid enough to jump off a bridge,
She announced, then stormed out of the room. I started eating the pancakes, but they were bland and unappetizing. Then I caught a whiff of rotting fruit. I crawled over to the garbage bin, lifted the lid, and gorged myself on the cornucopia of rotting apples and pears and blood oranges, vegetable peels, and putrid meat. As I was enjoying my meal, bothering no one, Mom walked in, saw me chewing on half-fermented orange, and shrieked, running out of the room again, which was starting to get old, frankly. I wouldn't see her for an entire week. The commute was uneventful. Other people on the bus didn't even bat an eye. That was probably because they were paying too much attention to their phones to notice a giant bug in their midst. I arrived at company headquarters on time, to my relief. Old Joe was standing by the door in his security guard uniform. I crawled up the stairs to greet him, but instead of nodding and smiling, he grabbed an iron pipe and ran toward me.
Stop!
I hissed, then flashed my badge.
It's me, Greg.
He was flabbergasted, dropped his iron pipe, and said,
Is that really you, Greg?
Yes, remember your daughter Nina? She made me a good luck charm.
When I showed him the Eye of Horus pin on my tie, he relaxed.
Oh my god. I'm so sorry. What happened?
I don't know. I must have looked at a gypsy fortune teller the wrong way.
But how you gonna go to work like that? No offense, you're a giant bug.
I will ask for accommodations. Right now, there are certain things I can't do, like use my cell phone. I hope they can do something about that. If tech whizzes can come up with 10 food delivery apps, they can certainly make a cell phone that doesn't require fingers to operate. Maybe one of those apps for the blind will do the trick.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, won't people be freaked out? I'm not saying it's right, but giant bugs aren't exactly popular.
Yeah, even I was a little freaked out at first, but they'll get used to it. I did. After all, discrimination is against the law, so they'll have to get along with me.
Joe shrugged and said,
I don't think that's how things work, but if you insist.
I had to open the door of the building with my mouth because my legs couldn't grip the doorknob. As I crawled through the office floor, people were finally paying attention to me, but not in a good way. When they saw me approaching, they cleared a path, keeping a distance of about 3 yards. Some of them gawked until I looked them in the eye. Then they recoiled. The odd thing was that some of my co-workers started to avoid me even before they saw me. God, I thought, am I so repulsive that people don't even have to see me before they feel disgusted by my appearance? Seeing all this made me feel dispirited, but then I thought to myself, no, positive thinking. Positive thinking. People might not like my new appearance, but they'll come around to it eventually. And maybe I'm being too self-conscious. It's not possible they were walking away from me even before they saw me. My mind is making stuff up. Yeah, that must be it. Finally, I got to my desk and turned on my computer. Despite losing 10 fingers, I had 6 legs, so keystroking went amazingly well. After a few minutes of adjusting to leg typing, I was answering emails easy peasy. After 30 minutes or so, Lisa came over. She's the boss's assistant.
Greg, I need you to...
She said while looking at her phone. Looking up, she stopped in the middle of her sentence, so startled she nearly fell backwards.
Is there something wrong?
I asked.
No. If you enjoy being a giant bug, who's to say?
She seemed to have run out of words. Despite what had gotten out, she kept her distance, as though a barrier at the entrance of my cubicle held her there.
I didn't choose this. It just happened. Anyway, if you just pretend everything is normal, the way I did when I woke up this morning, you'll get used to it too.
She stretched out her arms as far as possible, holding a piece of paper.
I need you to sign on this form. Can you do it?
Okay, but you need to help me since I don't have hands anymore. There's a bottle of ink in the top drawer of my desk. I need you to open it.
She smiled nervously and gingerly breached the invisible barrier to my cubicle, clinging onto the wall as she approached my desk. When she got as close as she could stomach, she stretched out her arms again. I half expected them to extend like some kind of plastic-based cartoon. She was able, barely, to pull open the drawer, reach for the ink, and unscrew the cap. I dipped the tip of my front leg right into the ink bottle and signed my name in a beautiful cursive script, even if I do say so myself. She picked up the paper and crisply thanked me, then left at lightning speed. It was such a relief to have Lisa out of the cubicle. In the best of times, we never really hit it off. A minute later, I heard a familiar voice from behind.
Greg, how's everything?
I turned around and saw Constantine looking at me with a sad face and trembling hands. Like Lisa, he stood as if paralyzed behind the entrance of my cubicle.
Nothing unusual, other than, me being turned into a giant bug.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
You don't need to apologize. It's not like you turned me into a bug. Or did you?
No, I'm not a mad scientist. Even if I were, it would be beyond my ability since I didn't do very well in biology. Anyway, I'm very concerned. How are you coping? Anything I can do?
Constantine and I were friends, and at least he was trying.
As well as I could with my new body. It's difficult to live without hands, but I'm doing the best I can to compensate.
No, that's not what I mean. Aren't you grossed out by the way you look?
I was at first, but after a few hours, I had a revelation. I realized I am the first human to turn into a non-human thing. I get to experience things no humans have ever experienced before. I get to see the world through compound eyes, smell the world through antenna, and feel what it's like to have the urge to eat garbage. How cool is that? I'm just like that guy, Shang Tzu. You know, the one who dreamed he was a butterfly.
Yeah, but everybody loves butterflies. Cockroaches, not so much.
First of all, I'm a beetle. You can tell because of the wing cases. Second, who's to say cockroaches are unlovable? Isn't beauty and ugliness a social construct? These women wearing ridiculous neck rings or gruesome lip discs, are they ugly or beautiful? I think they look fantastic, and that is all that matters. Here,
I said, then stood up and showed my back to him.
Isn't that the most gorgeous pair of elytra you've ever seen? So big and round and shiny.
Well, I don't know entomology any better than I know biology, so I'll just have to take your word for it, I guess.
I wiggled my posterior to show off my new body, but Constantine shuddered.
I don't think you understand what social construction means. That's something I know a little bit about.
I ignore him and continued.
They aren't just beautiful, they're functional as well. There are wings underneath these babies.
I spread open my elytra and started beating my wings. It was exciting to use them for the first time, like putting on a personal rocket pack as my entire body rumbled for takeoff. When I lifted off the floor, I looked down and saw the people in the neighboring cubicles. Unfortunately, my flight sent the entire office floor into a panic, and not just because a giant bug was flying around. My wings were creating a mini hurricane, blowing pieces of paper, women's hair, and fake plants all over the place. My coworkers began to flee loudly. Seeing this, I immediately landed back in my cubicle. Constantine looked completely shell-shocked.
Sorry about that.
I told him, feeling sheepish.
I got carried away. It's like I woke up and suddenly discovered I have superpowers. I just want to use them all the time.
But he remained speechless and slowly retreated toward the elevator, still facing me. He obviously couldn't wait to get to another floor. I gave him chase, but before I reached him, an intern materialized and said,
Greg, the boss wants to see you in her office. As in now.
Hardly anything good comes from the boss calling me to her office. She was smiling oddly when I entered, which calmed me down a bit. I tried sitting down, but kept tipping over. It was difficult to balance my round body on the chair. It took a few minutes for me to fiddle with the chair and adjust the height of the seat to where I could sit. And she was forced to wait for me, still smiling, but now through gritted teeth. She launched right in.
So, I heard you turned into a giant bug.
As you can see, it's true. And, in fact, despite some initial problems, I'm finding that my productivity hasn't been greatly impacted. I've only been here an hour, and I fixed 3 issues in our code base. But the office building itself, in its current form, does not suit my new body. I have a hard time opening doors and using the bathroom. I would greatly appreciate it if you could make changes to the building to facilitate my daily activities. I believe this is mandatory under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
The boss nodded like a bobblehead and said,
Of course. Our company is deeply respects the rights of everybody, insect Americans included, and will spare no expense to be ADA compliant.
I waved my antennae happily.
I'm so glad you understand my situation.
I smiled, or at least I think I did. The boss trained her trademark forced smile on me and got to the point.
Now that I've done a favor for you, would you mind doing one for me? From time to time, as you know, clients, important representatives from firms we work with will drop by. Even though everyone at our company supports you, those clients coming from outside might find the sight of you disturbing and take their business elsewhere. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Yes, stay in my cubicle whenever an account is on the line.
She chuckled.
Yeah, that's the first step. But our company also needs to maintain its image, so we don't want the public to know in any overt way that you work here. So you should only use the back door. You know, the one where they load and unload cargo. Also, please use the freight elevator.
But wouldn't I bump into the building maintenance staff?
Yeah, but those are not important people.
It felt demeaning to be treated as cargo, and it reeked of discrimination. I had an urge to ask for a separate water fountain. However, I didn't want to jump the gun and accuse her of anything then and there, since I would need to back up my claim. You'd be surprised how quickly a claim can evaporate without a paper trail. So I went along with the game she was playing with me and agreed to all her terms.
Great! You're a team player. Also, wouldn't you like to move to the basement? That way you wouldn't even bump into maintenance staff or anyone else, even by accident.
The basement is basically where the utility equipment is. The heating, cooling, electrical switches, and plumbing. It's not a very pleasant place, with all kinds of weird smells and sounds, and ugly concrete walls and floors. It's also a very lonely place. Only a few maintenance guys and gals are around, and only when something needs fixing. Not my idea of a suitable working environment.
Sorry, but that doesn't appeal to me. I like to amble about and talk with my coworkers, especially Constantine. It recharges my batteries, and I get more done.
I hear you, but you could teleconference, or if you really need to talk to anyone in person, we could arrange to have a special room reserved.
Of course, but I wasn't going to say this, but isn't forcing me to use a separate entrance, putting me in a separate place, isn't that pretty much the same as segregation?
The boss's eyes widened and she shook her head. Her hair didn't move, though. She used a lot of hairspray.
No, this isn't that at all. It's not discrimination. It really isn't. I am taking all these measures because I've noticed your coworkers not treating you well, and I want to protect you from being discriminated by them. You see, everything I'm trying to do is with your best interest in mind. Don't you see?
Okay, but if other people are discriminating me, shouldn't they be disciplined or at least educated on how not to discriminate? I mean, isn't that the reason we have an HR department?
The boss nodded in a wildly exaggerated manner and said,
Of course it is. I will talk to HR about steps to ensure a professional and pleasant working environment. Meanwhile, I am clearing an area in the basement so you can have a safe space for doing your work.
I sighed and said,
Okay, but only for the sake of the company. I hope you appreciate it, and that they appreciate it upstairs too.
She eked out a smile and nodded as I wriggled my way up and off of the chair. Overall, I had gotten some extremely mixed signals from her, so once I left her office, I put my head up against the plate glass window to see what she did next. My suspicions were confirmed. She was spraying Lysol on the chair where I had sat, then everywhere else in the room. And that concludes Chapter 1 of Bug Guy. Again, I thank both Dave and Edie for lending their voices. The two worked hard to bring the characters to life, and it shows in their performance. In fact, I will lead out with a conversation between the two on how they approach their characters. Enjoy!
Well, I love doing a Phil Silvers type voice. He's one of my favorite characters of all
What's he sound
time.
like? Remind us.
Well, sir, imagine your name in lights up in Hollywood.
I mean, they did, the Phil Silvers show, and then Top Cat was definitely an interpretation on Phil Silvers, that
okay.
cartoon. And then they had Phil Silvers on the Flintstones a couple of times. Guy like him coaching Fred Flintstone to be an actor. And there was this other actor, this big guy that was going to play his character as the Frogmouth. And he's saying, okay, you're big, you're loud, you're the Frogmouth. Can you do it? And this big guy says,
I think so.
but then they got Fred for the part because when they heard Fred talking,
He's the Frogmouth.
and Fred was really good at the part. And still he started thinking that he should be running the show, and they had to get rid of him.
You know, sadly, we're living in Washington, and to get the Flintstones, you had to have cable, and all we had was like a in-house antenna. So I never really got a chance to get into the Flintstones.